Good evening, dear listener. As the world outside quiets under the blanket of night and perhaps a soft rain taps against your window, allow me to draw you into a tale from the misty edges of folklore. Imagine a modest home on a fog-shrouded English lane, where the wind whispers secrets through the cracks in the walls. This is the story of the Monkey's Paw, a legend born from ancient curses and human longing, reminding us that some desires are best left unspoken. Settle in, let your eyelids grow heavy, and drift with me into this subtle dance of fate. It was a cold, blustery evening in the year of our Lord, sometime in the late Victorian era, when the White family gathered in their cosy parlour at Laburnum Villa. The house stood alone on a quiet road, surrounded by marshy fields that often filled with the scent of damp earth and distant sea salt. Mr. Herbert White, a young man of cheerful disposition, sat across from his father at the chessboard, the pieces casting long shadows in the flickering light of the oil lamp. The room smelled of pipe tobacco and freshly brewed tea, a comforting haze that warded off the chill seeping through the windows. Old Mr. White, with his weathered face and calloused hands from years of labour, pondered his next move. His wife, Mrs. White, a kind woman with silver-streaked hair tied in a neat bun, knitted by the fire, her needles clicking rhythmically like the ticking of a distant clock. The flames danced in the hearth, popping occasionally and sending sparks up the chimney, while outside the wind howled like a restless spirit seeking entry. "Checkmate," Herbert announced with a grin, leaning back in his chair. His father grumbled good-naturedly, resetting the board as the young man stretched his limbs. Herbert worked at the nearby machinery factory, his days filled with the clang of metal and the hum of engines, but evenings like this were his respite. A sharp rap at the door echoed through the house, cutting through the warmth like a chill draught. Mrs. White rose to answer it, her apron dusted with flour from earlier baking. Standing on the threshold was Sergeant Major Morris, an old friend of Mr. White's from his military days in India. The sergeant was a tall, burly man with a sun-baked face and eyes that held the shadows of far-off lands. He carried the faint aroma of exotic spices and weathered leather, his uniform coat still bearing the dust of travel. Come in, Mr. White urged, clapping his friend on the back. "Warm yourself by the fire. It's a beastly night out there." The sergeant nodded gratefully, stomping the mud from his boots on the mat. As they settled with glasses of whiskey, the conversation turned to tales of adventure. Morris spoke of scorching deserts, bustling bazaars filled with the calls of merchants and the scent of incense, and ancient temples where secrets lay hidden in stone. The family listened raptly, the fire's glow reflecting in their eyes. "But India holds more than beauty," Morris said, his voice dropping to a grave whisper. "There are things there that defy explanation, curses, charms, and relics that tamper with fate itself." Herbert leaned forward, intrigued. Like what, Sergeant? Morris hesitated, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. Then, from his pocket, he drew a small mummified object, a monkey's paw, twisted and dried, as if preserved from some forgotten ritual. It lay in his palm like a relic from a grave, its fur matted and fingers curled in eternal grasp. The room seemed to grow colder, the fire dimming slightly, as if in reverence or fear. This, Morris intoned, was spelled by a holy man in the East, to show that fate rules people's lives, and those who interfere with it do so to their sorrow. It grants 3 wishes to 3 separate men, but each wish comes at a terrible price. Mrs. White shivered, pulling her shawl tighter. Sounds like something from those old Arabian tales, she murmured, though her eyes were wide with a mix of curiosity and unease. Mr. White examined the paw closely, feeling its leathery texture under his fingertips. What happened to the previous owners? He asked. Morris's face darkened. The first man wished for death as his 3rd wish, he replied somberly. I've had my 3, and I warn you, throw it on the fire. But curiosity won over caution. As Morris prepared to leave, he tossed the paw into the flames. Quick as a flash, Mr. White snatched it out, ignoring the sergeant's protests. If it's as you say, perhaps a small wish couldn't hurt, he said lightly, though a faint unease stirred in his chest. Morris departed into the night, his footsteps fading into the howling wind. The family retired, but the paw remained on the mantel, a silent sentinel watching over the sleeping house. The next morning dawned grey and misty, the air thick with the smell of rain-soaked soil. Herbert teased his father over breakfast, the kitchen filled with the aroma of bacon and toast. Wish for £200, father. That'd pay off the house and no harm done. Mr. White chuckled, but as Herbert left for work, whistling down the path, a strange compulsion overtook him. Alone in the parlour, with Mrs. White humming in the next room, he held the paw aloft. I wish for £200, he declared, his voice echoing slightly in the empty space. A sudden crash, like a door slamming in the wind, made him drop the paw. He rubbed his hand, feeling a peculiar tingle, but nothing happened. Shrugging it off as fancy, he pocketed the talisman and went about his day. The hours passed slowly, the clock ticking steadily, marking time like a heartbeat. As evening fell, a stranger arrived at the door, a man in a sombre suit, his face etched with reluctance. He was from the factory. Mrs. White invited him in, offering tea, but his words shattered the peace. There's been an accident, he said gently. Your son, Herbert, caught in the machinery. He's gone. The world tilted. Mrs. White's cry pierced the air, a sound of raw anguish that echoed through the house. Mr. White stood frozen, the paw's weight heavy in his pocket. The stranger continued, offering condolences and a compensation of £200, exactly as wished. Grief enveloped Laburnum Villa like a shroud. The funeral came and went in a blur of black veils and muffled sobs, the churchyard misty with autumn fog. Days blurred into nights, the house silent save for the occasional creak of settling beams or the drip of rain from the eaves. Mr. and Mrs. White aged overnight, their faces lined with sorrow, the parlour now a place of shadows where memories lingered like ghosts. 10 days after the burial, on a night when the moon hid behind thick clouds and the wind moaned through the trees, Mrs. White bolted upright in bed, her eyes, wild with desperation, fixed on her husband. "The poor," she exclaimed, her voice hoarse from weeping. "We have 2 wishes left. Wish our boy alive again." Mr. White recoiled, the sheets tangling around him. The room was icy, the air thick with the scent of extinguished candles. "No, it's madness," he whispered, his heart pounding. "He's been in the ground 10 days. Think of what he might be now." But her grief fueled persistence. She dragged him from bed, her grip firm despite her frailty. Down the stairs he went, feeling his way in the pitch black, the floorboards groaning underfoot like warnings. The paw was on the mantel, cold to the touch, as if it absorbed the night's chill. Back in the bedroom, Mrs. White's face was alight with feverish hope, though to Mr. White it seemed unnaturally eager, almost otherworldly. "Wish," she commanded. With trembling hands he complied. "I wish my son alive again." The paw twisted in his grasp as if alive, then fell to the floor with a dull thud. Silence followed, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. They waited by the window, the blind raised to reveal the empty road glistening under a street lamp's feeble glow. Hours passed. The candle burned low, casting erratic shadows that danced like spectres on the walls. Exhaustion claimed Mr. White, and he crept back to bed, relieved when nothing came. Mrs. White joined him silently, the house enveloped in oppressive darkness. Neither slept. The clock ticked relentlessly, each second stretching into eternity. A stair creaked faintly, perhaps the house settling, or a mouse scurrying in the walls. Mr. White's nerves frayed. He lit a match to fetch a new candle, descending the stairs where the air grew heavier, laden with the musty smell of disuse. At the foot of the stairs the match flickered out. As he struck another, a soft knock sounded at the door, barely audible like a tentative brush of fingers. His breath caught, the matches spilled. Another knock, slightly louder. Panic surged. He fled upstairs, slamming the door. "What's that?" Mrs. White sat up, alert. "A rat," he lied, his voice shaking. But the knock grew insistent, resounding through the empty halls. "It's Herbert!" she cried, joy and terror mingling in her tone. She rushed for the door, but Mr. White restrained her, his arms like iron despite his fear. "Don't let it in," he begged. "For God's sake!" "You're afraid of your own son?" She struggled free, descending the stairs in a frenzy. The knocks intensified, a barrage echoing like drum beats in the night. Mr. White dropped to his knees, groping desperately for the paw lost in the shadows. Below he heard the chain rattle, the bolt resist her efforts. "The bolt, I can't reach it," she called. His fingers closed on the talisman just as the door creaked open. With a frantic breath, he uttered his final wish, though what it was, only the winds know. The knocking ceased abruptly, the house falling into stillness, save for the rush of cold wind up the stairs. He hurried down to find his wife wailing at the open door, staring into the empty road, bathed in flickering lamplight. No figure stood there, only the quiet night, deserted and serene. He pulled her inside, closing the door against the chill, and held her as sobs racked her frame. In the days that followed, life at Laburnum Villa resumed its quiet rhythm, though forever altered. The paw was gone, perhaps discarded or lost to the flames at last. The Whites spoke little of that night, but in the hush of evenings, when rain pattered and thunder murmured, they remembered the folly of tampering with fate. And so, dear listener, as our tale draws to a close, reflect on the whispers of desire in your own heart. May your wishes be simple, your nights peaceful. If these shadows of the past have lulled you towards slumber, subscribe for more such tales from the annals of folklore. Like and share if they stirred your imagination, and comment below with your thoughts. Until next time, sleep well in the quiet embrace of the dark. Good night.